All right, so we've programmed some drums in the Kurt Ballou Signature Series drum library. Let's check out how we're going to mix them. All right, so let's check out this this full bleed thing. Here's the snare drum in the God City preset, which is kind of like my standard go-to. Turn on full mic bleed and then go into the mixer area and let's solo just the top snare mic. All right, so you can see how you can have as much or as little cymbals as you want bleeding into the snare mic. That's what it's like mixing Ben. Tons of cymbals in the snare mic. I don't like that, so I just generally turn it off. These bleed controls will still be active for the room mics, even when you are not in full bleed mode, which is what I use, because generally speaking, in the close mics, I don't want to hear that cymbal bleed. And I don't really care about kick drum bleeding into the snare drum mic, for example. It does sound a little bit more realistic to have the kick kind of triggering the snare chains a little bit, but I don't really care about that myself. All right, so within the snare mic, there's this cool trick that I picked up from Matt Ellard when we were recording Jane Doe, something called turbo tracks. It was in analog, so he would just do it with a mult on the console, but he would create a duplicate of the snare track and then gate and compress and EQ that duplicate separate from the original and just kind of blend it in subtly with the main snare track. You're kind of reinforcing that drum. It's not the primary part of the sound, but it's adding some weight and some attack and some clarity to it without completely changing the organic tonal character of the drum. So you've got this turbo track thing. I'm going to solo just the turbo track so you can hear that it's compressed, gated, and saturated. And I did all of this processing with analog gear. So this is actually a separate sample running alongside the primary sample. So this volume enables you to blend it in with the primary sample. The sustain control lets you determine whether you want a super fast, clicky kind of attack or something with more sustain and body. So if you're just trying to add attack, put the sustain down, which is what I like to do. And then threshold is a MIDI velocity. So that determines what's the minimum velocity in which we start getting turbo tracks. So for light snare hits, grace notes and what have you, rolls, press rolls, stuff like that, the turbo track's not going to kick on. For harder hits, it's going to kick on. So let me take turbo out of solo, and then we'll bring the volume of turbo all the way down. We're going to listen to the snare in solo over here, and then slowly blend the turbo track in with it. Let me turn on the snare bottom as well, so we hear more of a full picture of the snare. We're getting a bunch of extra attack from there. Now this all happens before the EQ and compressor and saturator and reverb send within the channel strip. This snare drum, you can kind of see some EQ moves I would typically do to a snare drum. There's a high pass filter. There is a low frequency EQ that can be bell or shelf depending on where you've selected this button. And then varying frequencies and bandwidths for low mid and high mid, and then the high is also either a shelf or a bell. Typical for what I do when I'm mixing is somewhere in the 180 to 220 hertz range. I'm adding some meat to the snare. I'm sucking out some low mid to give it some size, but also to kind of push it back a bit in the sound field. And then there's an upper mid boost to add attack, and then a high boost to add a little bit of sizzle to the drum. Also some compression, sort of medium attack and release times to add attack, but do some range controlling, and then we have a mix control, so we're only mixing in a bit of compression. So let's hear with that processing, all these processes turned off, a little bit of saturation too, just to make it sound more tapey. Yeah, sounds pretty good. So we have these turbo tracks, not with every channel. So snare bottom doesn't have turbo track, like kick sub doesn't have turbo track, but kick in has turbo track. So that's kind of obnoxious on its own, but blend it in with the kick in. Sounds good. Add some outside kick mic, starts getting a little bit more organic sounding. Add the sub mic and you get a little more depth. All right, adding more and more instruments. Got some toms. Toms have turbo tracks as well. Overheads do have bleed controls, so check it out. So if you want to go for like a more traditional, kind of hands-off drum tone, something more like 70s style, you might want to get most of your snare sound from the overheads. This enables you to get that style of sound, but still have a lot of control over the drum balance. So you can have tons of toms and snare from the overheads, but not a lot of cymbals if you want. So something like this. So let's hear what just that plus the kick out mic would sound like. It sounds a little thin right now. Try and get the whole sound from there, but let's see if we can find some of the tom frequencies by reducing our high pass filtering on the overheads EQ and then turning up bell in the low frequencies. So just those two mics are actually, it's a pretty good drum sound. Let me show you some of the other mics we have. There's the near room, which was an AEA R88, really fantastic ribbon mic. So I like getting a lot of the tom sound from this mic. And then the far mic, which is an omnidirectional Sound Deluxe E49 in my bathroom and in one of my ISO booths, a really reflective sounding room. This is like what I use for the explosive drum sound. So blended in subtly with the rest of the kit adds quite a bit more size than you would think you'd get out of a room as small as my live room. Let's try blending that just with like the kick and snare. All right, we need some toms in there, otherwise it sounds weird. All right, so it's just like another communicative tool. You can show your bandmates your song ideas by programming drums in this drum library, or if you're a songwriter without a band, you can get some really super realistic sounding drums that sound like they were recorded here without actually having to pay me to record here. You should still hire me to record your band. If I like your band. But if I don't like your band, or you are not able to come here and you want to get my drum sound, this is how to do it, because this thing totally sounds like it.
Yeah, I may hate you.
Yeah. I don't like your band.
You may spot
I
this.
can still have my recording.
I probably don't like your band. So just use this, and then I don't have to be tortured with your music.